"You'll embarrass yourself there, Mom. Please just stay home." That's what my son said. Not shouted, not argued, just said it, flat, calm, like he was telling me the grocery store was closed. I held the phone against my ear for a few seconds after those words landed, listening to the silence on his end, the way he breathed when he'd already made up his mind and was just waiting for me to agree. The banquet was in 4 days, the kind of event with a dress code printed on the invitation in italics. My son was being honored, Businessman of the Year by the Regional Chamber of Commerce. I'd found out through an email from someone at his firm who assumed, reasonably, that his mother might want to know. He hadn't told me himself. I sat down at the kitchen table after we hung up. The same table I've had for 22 years, the one with the wobbly leg I keep meaning to fix and never do. I put both hands flat on the surface and looked at them. 64 years old, hands that have done a lot of work. Hands that packed school lunches and signed school loans and wrote checks I never asked to be paid back. I looked at my hands and I thought, I raised that man. I did not stay home. I found the navy dress in the back of my closet, the one I wore to my sister's retirement party 3 years ago. It still fit. It still looked clean and honest, the way a good dress should. I pressed it the night before, slowly, going over the sleeves twice the way my mother taught me. I polished my shoes. I did my hair the way I used to before I stopped having reasons to. The morning of the gala, I drove myself to the Hargrove Event Center on Meridian Boulevard. 40 minutes in traffic. I parked in the overflow lot and walked slowly across the pavement because my hip has been acting up again and I wasn't going to rush. I paid $12 for a general admission ticket at a side table near the entrance, and I smiled at the young woman who handed it to me, and she smiled back, and that was all I needed. I found a seat near the rear of the hall, behind a pillar, close enough to see the stage. The room was all white tablecloths and centerpieces, women in heels, men in suits. Renee was near the front, in a red dress that must have cost more than my car payment. My son stood beside her, taller than I remember every time I see him, broad shoulders, his father's jaw. He was shaking hands and laughing the way you laugh when you want people to feel like they matter to you. He's always been good at that. They announced his name just after dessert, Daniel Pruitt. The applause was generous. He walked to the podium looking exactly like what he'd become, polished and purposeful, and completely at ease with being seen. He thanked his team, his wife, the community. He talked about hard work and roots. He talked about his father, who passed when Daniel was 19. He did not mention me. I clapped from my seat behind the pillar. A woman next to me leaned over and whispered, "Do you know him?" I said, "He's my son." She looked surprised and then smiled wide. "You must be so proud." I said that I was. You can be proud of someone and heartbroken at the same time. That's something you learn later in life, when the people you love grow into strangers wearing familiar faces. I slipped out before the room started to empty. I didn't want to be found. I just wanted to have been there. Daniel has not always been this person. I want to say that clearly because it matters. He was not born indifferent. When he was small, he was the gentlest child I had ever known. And I say that, having known quite a few. He used to sit on the kitchen counter while I made dinner and talk to me about everything, school and friends and the kinds of things 7-year-olds think about. Whether dogs can understand English, whether stars were on or off like light switches. He talked to me like I was interesting, like I was worth talking to. His father died in the spring of Daniel's sophomore year of college. I buried my husband on a Thursday and went back to work the following Monday because we had a mortgage and I was the only one left to pay it. I worked as an office manager for a property firm. Good, steady work, not glamorous. I wore the same 6 outfits in rotation and drove a used Honda, and I never once complained to my son because he had enough to carry. I helped him finish school, covered the gap when his scholarships fell short 2 years in a row. He graduated, got a job, climbed, fast. He was always smart. Has his father's focus and my stubbornness, which is a dangerous combination in the best possible way. Then he met Renee. I want to be fair about Renee, because I've thought hard about what's mine to say and what isn't. She's not a cruel person. I don't believe she sits around thinking about ways to diminish me. I think she simply made a decision early on about what kind of life she wanted, what kind of family she came from, what aesthetic she was building, and I didn't fit it. I was too plain for her picture, too worn at the edges. She handled me the way you handle something outdated that someone still insists has sentimental value. Carefully, at arm's length, with a smile that never quite reached the eyes. I paid for half their wedding. I didn't offer, Daniel asked, and I said yes because I thought it was the thing you did. Renee had always assumed the other half would come from her parents, who changed their minds about the amount 3 weeks before the ceremony. I covered it. I didn't make a scene about it. I told myself that's what mothers do. I still believe that. What I didn't understand then was that for Renee, my helping was a transaction, not a gift. She filed it somewhere internal and never mentioned it again, and when she stopped mentioning it, eventually Daniel stopped too. They bought a house in Sycamore Hills 4 years ago. Beautiful neighborhood, the kind where every lawn looks intentional. The down payment was $28,000. I wired it the same day, Daniel asked. He said they'd pay me back when they could. He's never brought it up since. I drive past that house sometimes. I don't stop. I just drive past and look at the well-watered lawn and the new windows and the basketball hoop in the driveway that my grandson Connor uses, and I think about the fact that I paid for the ground they're all standing on, and none of them think about that when they walk out the front door in the morning. Connor is 15. He has my eyes, which I find both comforting and complicated. He's a quiet kid, watchful, the kind who listens more than he speaks. He used to come over on Fridays after school and eat everything in my refrigerator and tell me about his week in that unhurried way teenagers reserve for people they actually trust. Those Fridays slowed down about 2 years ago. They stopped completely around the time Renee signed him up for Saturday enrichment classes and Thursday debate and a travel soccer league that seemed to take up every free hour he had. I told myself he was just busy. I still tell myself that. My friend Patrice has been saying for 3 years that I need to stop making myself small to fit into their plans. Patrice is from New Orleans originally, 68 years old, twice divorced, and the most clear-eyed person I have ever known. She says what other people are thinking, and she doesn't apologize for it, and I love her for it even when it stings. She called me the morning after the gala. He didn't tell you until you found out from someone else, she said. It wasn't a question. That's right. And he told you to stay home. He said I'd embarrass myself. She was quiet for a second. Then, did you go? Anyway? I sat behind a pillar in the overflow section and watched him win an award, and he didn't mention me in his speech. Another silence. Longer this time. Okay, she said. Now what? That question stayed with me for 2 days. I moved through my house carrying it, watering my plants with it, lying awake with it at 2 in the morning. Now what? I had asked myself that question after my husband died, and the answer then had been, you keep going, you work, you show up, you do what's needed. But this was different. My son wasn't gone. He was here, 40 minutes away in a house I helped pay for, living a life I helped build, winning awards for a business I had floated through its first 2 years with loans I told him not to worry about paying back. On the 3rd morning, I went to my filing cabinet. I keep things organized. Always have. My husband used to joke that I could find any document in under 60 seconds, which is not a skill anyone appreciates until they need it. I pulled the cabinet open and started at the beginning. Folder 1, Mortgage Assistance. The $28,000. Also a separate transfer of $4,000 when they had trouble with the closing costs timeline. I'd forgotten about that second one. Folder 2. Business Startup. Pruitt Consulting, LLC. I had gone through my retirement account at 61 to help him get established. Withdrew early. Took the penalty. $45,000. He told me it was temporary. That once the firm turned a profit, he would reinstate what I'd lost. The firm turned a profit in year 2. That conversation never happened. Folder 3. Home repairs and upgrades. A new roof, $9,000. An HVAC system, $6,000. The windows I saw from the street when I drove past, $11,000. Renee had texted me a photo of the old windows with a sad face emoji and said the boys were getting drafts in their rooms at night. I sent the check before the week was out. I kept going. Connor's private school enrollment, which I had been covering since 4th grade. $14,000 a year. I did the math and sat with it. There was an envelope at the back of the drawer with no label. Inside was a receipt for a trip to Cabo the previous February. I hadn't paid for the trip itself. Daniel had. But that month they had asked me to cover their credit card minimum because money was tight after the holidays. $1,500. The receipt showed a resort bill for 4 nights. I stacked everything on the kitchen table and looked at it. I'm not a dramatic person. I don't make speeches. But sitting there in the morning light, looking at 20 years of paper evidence of my own willingness to be taken for granted, something shifted inside me. Not with heat, with a kind of cold clarity that felt like finally seeing a room clearly after years of bad lighting. I picked up my phone and called the bank. My account manager is a young woman named Sandra, who has always been patient with me and doesn't talk to me like I'm confused. I told her I needed to cancel all my automatic transfers. She asked if I could come in. I said I'd be there at 10 o'clock. I wore my cardigan with the pearl buttons. I did my hair. I drove myself there, and I sat across from Sandra, and I handed her a list I had written by hand that morning. 12 transfers. Daniel's mortgage top-up, which I had been making quietly every month since the rate adjustment hit. The school tuition, auto pay, the utility account I was linked to for their house, the business account where I had standing authorization for emergency draws. All of these? Sandra asked. All of them. She typed without comment, which I respected. When she was done, she turned the screen toward me. That's everything. Is there anything else you'd like to update today? I thought for a moment. Remove my son's secondary access to my savings account. She didn't blink. Of course. I hadn't realized until that moment how long I had been holding my breath. Something in my chest released, like the loosening of a very old knot. On the way home, I stopped at the diner on Claremont Ave, where Patrice and I used to go every Tuesday before her knees got bad. I sat in a booth by the window and ordered coffee and a slice of coconut cake, and I ate it slowly and watched people walk past on the sidewalk, and I felt, for the first time in a long time, like a person with a story still being written. They called that night. Renee first, at 8:47, voice light and careful the way it always was when she wanted something. There was an issue with the school portal. Something about an auto payment not processing. Probably a technical glitch. Could I check my account when I had a moment? I listened to the voicemail twice. Then I set the phone face down and went to bed. Daniel called at 9:15. No message. By 8 the next morning, I had 11 missed calls between the two of them and a text from Daniel that said, "Mom, something's wrong with the bank. Call me. Something's wrong with the bank." I read it 3 times. I thought about all the years he'd called me when something needed solving. When the startup hit a cash flow problem. When Renee wanted to upgrade the kitchen and they were 3 months post-vacation. When the car lease needed a cosigner and he'd asked so casually, so easily, like he already knew the answer. He'd always already known the answer. He came to the house at noon, no call ahead. He walked up my porch steps, looking the way he does when he's behind on something, jaw set, moving fast, energy tight across his shoulders. I watched him from the window before I opened the door. "Mom," he said, "what's going on?" I stepped aside. "Come in." He sat at the table. He didn't look at the empty coffee pot or ask if I wanted to sit. He just started. The school hadn't processed. The mortgage account had flagged. The utility auto pay was showing canceled. His business emergency access was revoked. Had something happened with the account? Did I think the bank had made an error? I sat across from him. "No error," I said. He looked at me. "I made the changes myself." He was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Because I'm simplifying." That's not an answer. "Connor's tuition is due in 3 weeks." "I know. Then what are we supposed to do?" I folded my hands on the table. "I think that's the first time you've ever said 'we' in a conversation about finances and included yourself." He leaned back. "That's not fair." "I went through my files," I said. I sat down and I added everything up. "Do you want to know the number?" He didn't say yes, but he didn't say no either. He just looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, somewhere between anger and something that might have been the beginning of understanding, if he'd been willing to let it go further. "You told me not to come to the gala," I said. "You said I'd embarrass myself. Meanwhile, I have been paying for your roof, your windows, your child's education, your business float, your down payment, and a Cabo resort I didn't know about until I found the receipt." He flushed. "I was going to tell you about that." "When, Daniel?" "It wasn't. We needed a reset. Renee had a hard year. Renee's had a lot of hard years. I've paid through all of them." "When did you plan to have a hard year on your own?" He stood up. He started to pace, which he's done since he was 12 when he couldn't sit with discomfort. I watched him and waited. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," he said finally. "I know," I said. "That's the part that took me longest to understand. You didn't plan any of it. You just kept asking and I kept saying yes, and somewhere in there we both forgot that yes isn't the same as unconditional." He stopped pacing. "I'm not trying to punish you," I continued. "I want to be clear about that. I'm not angry in the way that wants to hurt you. I'm awake in the way that finally understands its own worth. And those two things look the same from the outside, but they are not the same thing." He didn't say anything for a long while. Outside, a lawnmower started up somewhere down the street. A dog barked twice and stopped. "The gala," he said finally. His voice was different now. Quieter. "I shouldn't have said what I said." "No, you shouldn't have. Renee had invited a lot of her clients, and you didn't want me there." He didn't argue. At least he gave me that. "You won an award," I said, "for a business I helped build. And you didn't want your mother in the room." He looked at me then. Really looked. And I saw something move across his face. Guilt, maybe. Or the particular shame that comes from hearing something you already knew said clearly in the open air. I felt sorry for him in that moment. Not enough to take back what I'd done, but enough to mean it when I said what came next. "I love you, Daniel. That hasn't changed. But I will not keep buying my way into your life. I shouldn't have to." He left without resolving anything. He did that a lot. I'd noticed. Left before the conversation was finished so he could tell himself it wasn't over yet. I watched his car back out of my driveway, and I sat for a while in the kitchen, and I thought about all the years I had confused giving with belonging. Patrice came over that evening with a peach cobbler, and the expression she wears when she already knows everything, but is waiting for you to say it yourself. I told her about the files and the bank and Daniel's visit. She listened without interrupting, which for Patrice is an act of discipline. When I finished, she said, "Did he apologize?" "Not quite." She nodded. "Did you expect him to?" I thought about it honestly. "No." "Good." She cut 2 pieces of cobbler. "Because that's not actually what this is about." "What is it about?" She put a plate in front of me. "It's about you finally deciding you're not an ATM with a casserole." I laughed. I hadn't laughed in days. It felt strange, and then it felt good. I made an appointment with my attorney that week. Gerald Whitmore has handled my affairs for 15 years. He drafted my will, managed the property paperwork when I sold my mother's house, helped me navigate my husband's estate. He's never talked over me, and he's never suggested I didn't understand something without asking first. I appreciate both of those things more than I can say. He read through the documents I brought without comment. His glasses slid down his nose twice, and he pushed them back without looking up. When he finished, he set the folder on his desk and laced his fingers. "You've been carrying a considerable load," he said. "I didn't add it up until this week. What would you like to do?" "I'd like to update everything. The will, the trust, the beneficiary designations. I want my son to be provided for in a modest and structured way. I don't want him left with nothing, but I don't want him to receive anything without conditions." "And your grandson?" "Connor gets the primary trust. Unrestricted access at 25. Educational support before that. Medical hardship provisions." Gerald made notes. "Your son may contest it. Let him." He looked up over his glasses with the mild expression of a man who has seen a great deal of family drama and is no longer surprised by any of it. "You sound certain." "I've been uncertain for 20 years. I know what that feels like. This feels different." We worked for 2 hours. At the end, he walked me to the door and shook my hand. "One more thing," he said. "The house goes to Connor directly, or to his trust if he's still a minor. It doesn't pass through Daniel." He nodded and made a final note. "I'll have everything drawn up by end of week." I drove home with the windows down because it was the kind of October day that doesn't apologize for being beautiful. The leaves on the oaks along Ridgefield Drive were going orange, and the sky was that particular shade of blue that only happens for about 3 weeks a year. I drove slowly, and I looked at all of it. Renee called on a Thursday, 2 weeks after Daniel's visit. She'd dropped the pleasant voice by then. This one was clipped and direct, which honestly, I respected more. She said they had retained someone to explore their options given what she called the abrupt withdrawal of long-standing financial support. I wrote down the phrase because it was impressive. Abrupt withdrawal of long-standing financial support. I thought about the $28,000 wire I'd sent on 48 hours' notice when the closing was at risk. I thought about the roof that no one called to thank me for. I thought about the Cabo receipt. I wrote her a letter, not an email, a letter, on the stationery I keep in the secretary desk in the hall, pale gray with my name embossed at the top. I took my time with it. "Dear Renee," I wrote, "I understand you have sought counsel. That is your right. I have done the same. My financial decisions are my own to make, and I have made them. There is no misunderstanding to clarify, and no arrangement I am willing to revisit. I wish you and my son well, and I hope that with time, you'll both come to understand that what I've done is not a withdrawal. It's a correction. Warmly, Lauren." I used my first name instead of a title. It felt right, like signing off on something that no longer needed to explain itself. Connor came on a Saturday morning without calling ahead. I heard his skateboard on the driveway before I saw him. He came through the back gate the way he used to when he was 10, and still thought asking was optional. He stood in the kitchen doorway looking more like my husband than he ever had, same height now, same expression that was trying to be casual and not quite making it. "Hey," he said. "Hey, yourself. Close the door. The heat's on." He closed it, sat at the table. I poured him a glass of juice because that's what I do, and waited. "Things are kind of bad at home," he said. "I know. Mom and Dad are fighting more than usual." He wrapped his hands around the glass. "Dad's been in his office every night." "I'm sorry. That's hard to be around." He nodded. "He told me it's because of money stuff." I looked at him steadily. "That's true. How come?" I thought about how to say it. He was 15. He deserved something real, not a softened version. Because I realized I was paying to be included in a life where I wasn't really welcome, I said. And that's not giving anymore. That's just paying for something you should already have for free. He was quiet. He turned the glass slowly in his hands. Is that why you came to the gala? He asked. And sat in the back? I looked at him. You knew? I saw you. When Dad was at the podium. He didn't look up. I wanted to come over. But Mom was right there, and I didn't. He stopped. It's okay. It's not, though. Now he did look up. He should have wanted you there. The thing about grief is that it surprises you. You think you've accounted for it, and then a 15-year-old boy says the true thing, and you feel it all over again, fresh and full. I didn't cry in front of him. I took a breath, and I nodded. Thank you for saying that. I mean it. I know you do. That's why it means something. He stayed for 3 hours. We made grilled cheese sandwiches and watched 2 episodes of a nature show he was into, and at some point, he fell asleep on the couch with his feet hanging over the armrest the way he used to as a little kid. I covered him with the throw blanket and let him sleep. When he woke up and was getting ready to leave, he stood at the door for a moment. Grandma, are you okay? I thought about it the way the question deserved to be thought about. I'm better than I've been in a long time, I said. I'm not pretending that's the same as easy. But yes, I'm okay. He nodded. Good. Come back whenever you want. Front door, back gate, I don't care which. He smiled. First real smile I'd seen from him in months. He looked like himself when he did that. He looked like mine. I closed the door and stood in the quiet hallway for a minute, one hand on the wall, listening to the house settle around me. There's a particular kind of silence that comes after someone you love has just left, and it can go either way. It can feel like emptiness, or it can feel like the particular richness of your own space, your own air, your own story with room left in it. This one felt like the second kind. I have lived in this house for 19 years. I raised my son here, part of the way. I grieved my husband here. I learned, late and harder than it should have been, that love is not the same as sacrifice, and that you can spend your whole life being useful and still die invisible if you let people make that the arrangement. I am not going to be invisible anymore. I went to the gala, and I sat behind a pillar, and I watched my son receive an honor he earned with ability I helped build, and not one person in that room knew who I was. I drove home alone, and I stood in my kitchen in my navy dress, and I looked at my reflection in the dark window above the sink, and I decided that was the last time. The last time I would make myself small for someone else's comfort. The last time I would sit in the back row of my own family's life. The accounts are changed. The will is updated. The trust is Connor's. The house is his too, when the time comes. My son will be angry for a while. Renee may stay angry longer. I understand that, and I've made my peace with it. I'm not punishing them. I'm just done paying for proximity. I'm done buying a welcome that should have been given freely. If you are reading this and you recognize something in what I've said, then let me tell you directly. You are allowed to change the terms. You are allowed to add it all up. Look at the number and say, not anymore. You are not obligated to fund a life that leaves no room for you. You are not required to be patient past the point of your own harm. I am 64 years old, and I am finally, honestly, entirely my own. And if that makes me difficult, then that is a difficulty I have earned, and I will wear it well. Follow along for more stories like this one, and if something here found you where you are, leave a comment. You might be surprised how many people are sitting quietly in the same back row, waiting to stand up.